how Facebook ads actually work, how targeting actually works, why you don't need to worry about audiences because every ad makes its own lookalike audience, how the auction and the algorithm and your bid and estimated action rate and your advertiser score, how does that all come together? These are very basic principles that everybody should know. And they are absolutely essential knowledge for everyone trying to be successful. The sad truth is, though, the vast majority of marketers, and I mean 80–90% of anybody running ads right now, especially folks working at agencies or in-house, the vast majority of them don't understand this at all. While these are very basic principles, misunderstanding them is why most people struggle. So let's fix that. Every ad you make, just like every organic post on Facebook and Instagram, every video you drop, every reel that you create, every single thing that you put in there is referred to within the Facebook ecosystem by its post ID. That post ID is the URL of that post's webpage. Because every time you make an ad or an organic post, all you're doing is actually creating an additional web page on Facebook's website or on Instagram's. And our apps are just navigation tools to see all of these different web pages. So when you make an ad, all you're really doing is building a web page. And when you spend money to promote it, you're just paying to show that web page to more people. The Facebook news feed, just like the Instagram news feed, and honestly, every other optimized CPM environment, like YouTube or TikTok, Pinterest, Snapchat, etc. It's just a rich media listing of many web pages. Just like search. When you go onto Google and you type something in, you get a detailed description of a bunch of websites, but you just get the text. On Facebook, you get the entire thing. You get the image or video. You get the words to go with it. You get everything. And Facebook is measuring the click-through rate, the stickiness, the bounce rate, the engagement rate, the time on site, and the behavior that somebody takes both online and off after they're shown that post ID. What do you do? And how does this post ID impact your behavior? Facebook is measuring that on every single impression. Facebook, just like all other optimized CPM environments, analyzes the user behavior against every single web page within their own app or site, every single post in the newsfeed, every single reel that you've seen. And then their machine learning is built around showing users content in real time that they want to see and are likely to engage with, based on trillions of data points. So think of search, where you type in what it is that you want to see. You have intent. So you are trying to go there and say, I want to see X, Y, and Z, and they show you a list based on popularity. Facebook is very much the same thing, only every time you hit refresh on Facebook or Instagram, you don't have to tell the machine what you want. It knows, and it shows that to you, and it does it extremely well. So your post, your ad, your reel, your TikTok, your YouTube video, your pin, all of that stuff, you have to remember, they're just web pages within that platform's own website. Social media, these platforms are built around giving you a dynamic feed of content that you want to see. Up until the end of MySpace, when Facebook started to come in, the fundamental shift was that Facebook made a dynamic portal that, based on your behavior both online and in the real world, was curated to your own needs, with the machine learning giving you a dedicated and optimized experience to maximize your time on the platform, as well as the quality of the experience while you're there, so that you come back again. the organic feed on every platform runs on the exact same logic as the paid media engine of that platform. So the only real difference is when we're using paid media, running ads, we're just paying for the attention. And what we see in Facebook as a CPM is pretty much just based on how desirable is our content to the audience that we're targeting. If we want more people to see our content, we can make broader appealing things. If our content better meets Facebook's business objectives of retaining attention and keeping people on the platform for longer and feeling better about it, we're going to see lower CPMs because we're a better partner to Facebook in meeting their business objectives. We're algorithmically aligned. This is just yet another reason that broad is the only targeting you ever need, because every ad is a post ID. Every ad is a web page. The data of how this post ID is received by users on that platform is what we call the learnings. The learnings happen at the ad level. That's how Facebook works. So the idea here of broad is basically saying, how do I position myself in a way that I provide the least amount of barrier to my ad, using all of the data that it has in the learnings to show the right user the content that they want to see, in which case might be my content. That's why we use broad. So Facebook targeting explained. The ads do the targeting. I feel like we've scratched the surface on this. Let's dive deep. Because of the data each post ID has, whether it's paid or organic, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok or YouTube, Pinterest, Snapchat, go on. The platform knows how people will respond to it. The more data that that post has, the higher the accuracy and confidence of this knowledge and the decision-making capability of the algorithm. The point here is, the more information the machine has, the better that they're going to be able to be at showing that content to people who want to respond to it positively. So just like with organic reach, Facebook uses the ads data to determine who to show your content to. Maybe you posted an Instagram reel and it got like 400 likes and you only have 200 followers. Well, that happened because your content, for whatever reason, was something people liked. So Facebook showed that content for more people. You got greater organic reach. When we're running ads, we get greater reach. And the way that we see that is in lower CPMs. The way to maximize that is to go broad so we prevent the least amount of inhibition to the audience that that post should be shown to. Every post determines who looks like those who've already, at a platform level, had a desirable experience and one that meets Facebook's business needs of attention and retention. All content data, remember, paid or organic, is used to find other users who look like those who previously responded desirably. If that sounds a lot like a lookalike audience, it's because it is. You're right. That's exactly what it is. Every post ID, organic or paid, is actively curating its own lookalike audience by taking in the data of understanding how everybody that's currently been shown that content, how did they behave? For instance, if an ad got shown to 1,000 people, 500 people loved it and 500 people hated it, do you really think the next 1,000 people aren't going to more closely resemble the 500 that received it positively? When we pay for ads, what we are doing is forcing our content into the algorithmic feeds of users. And our CPMs come as a direct ramification of that. Our bid in the algorithm then competes in the auction to show our content to other users based on the merit of the user experience. Think of it like this. Every ad is effectively a burden on the end user. People are not logging into Instagram to see your ads. So, how much of a burden is it? The greater the burden, the greater the cost. And that's another reason why we use broad. Because when we use targeting audiences, that level of burden is extremely higher. Because that audience that we're targeting might not have a large overlap with the audience that ad wants to make for itself. So we're showing our ads to a lot of people that don't want to see it. We're spending a lot of money to force our messaging to people that are not interested. And we're going to pay a higher cost because we're presenting ourselves as a greater liability to Facebook's business model. Dynamic ads in Facebook, or dynamic creatives, or DCTs. Let's deep dive into this and see why it's so fundamentally different than a regular post ID and how it operates in a way that basically says if you're not using it, you're making a mistake. Let's dive into this. So first off, dynamic ads, just like all other posts, collate the data at the post ID level. The biggest difference here is that the web page itself is now dynamic. It's not 20 different web pages, each one fighting against each other and collecting their own data in silos. It's one web page with 20 different potential variations, but all of the learning is still consolidated to one single place. Facebook is letting that web page that is being promoted respond and adapt dynamically to let each user see the content that they want to. This allows the platform to see every data point from every ad iteration at scale and to use that to make decisions. The purpose of dynamic ads is to use the algorithm to develop web pages that are most directly and algorithmically aligned for optimal user experiences. And basically what we're saying here is dynamic ads are excellent because we have one web page that adapts and responds to each individual user's desires. And then from that, when we're using dynamic creative tests, we're ultimately going to understand what combination of options is the most desirable set of elements to give us the best possible iteration. When we're using machine learning and data-based science to conduct market research at scale, to develop high value and high confidence assets, we are going to beat human guesswork every single time. And if it's well done, that's also a big point. Because if you're not doing it correctly, then you're misusing a tool and the outcome of your work is, well, not going to meet expectation. So with that being said, I just want to repeat this. When we use dynamic ads to let that one web page adapt and dynamically mold itself to what people want to see, that web page is going to collect all the data from every single possible iteration and give you the best user experience, plus give you an output of the post ID that you could have the most confidence in. With that being said, let's go over the 3 simple rules that you need to know to make dynamic creative work for you. Dynamic creative rule number 1. Do not have more than 3 options per element. You don't want 4 headlines. You don't want 6 creatives. You don't want 4 or 5 primary text. I'd also argue that you want at least 2. Because every choice that you make should ultimately be binary to help you eliminate human prejudice. Is it good enough? Yes or no? If not, what's the single biggest liability that we can remove to optimize this dynamic, responsive web page to make it better? And if it is great, awesome. Let's extract the best post ID and launch the next test. Dynamic creative test rule number 2. Run DCTs until you are confident in the ability to project the test's outcome. This is vital. If you don't know the efficiency that will come from that ad, by definition, the test isn't done. Every test within the scientific method ultimately ends because you have a high level of confidence of, can you predict the outcome, yes or no? And if the answer is no, maybe that test is a failure. Great. Maybe the test outcome is it's volatile. Okay, now we understand. Or if the answer is yes, great, we understand. We know where we're going. If we don't know, then that test isn't finished. You should be able to know and predict the blended output of the test and know if it's good, or know that there's no ability to make a prediction at all. Dynamic creative test rule number 3. This is the last thing. Extract the post IDs of the ads with the best estimated action rate. When you are using dynamic creatives, remember, we have a dynamic web page that is adapting and responding to each individual user's needs. What we're ultimately trying to do out of that is say, given all the possible combinations, what's the best version of this landing page? You're doing conversion rate optimization of that web page, but instead of it being on your site, it's Facebook's actual own web page because you're making content on their site. From here, how do we find that? You hit preview Facebook post with comments. You grab the post ID of the top ads by hitting the timestamp of those ads. Copy everything after the last little slash and paste that into the field that says use existing post when you're creating an ad.